Hi, everyone. Welcome to Featured Pros Live. We're all very glad to have you back. If you've ever wondered how great trial lawyers actually prepare cases, how they move from chaos to clarity, from piles of information to a story that judges and juries can follow, you're in exactly the right place. On the Lit software side, I'm Hillary Hames. I'm the VP of Enterprise Relationships. I work closely with law firms and government entities as they explore, evaluate, and adopt our software, making sure that the buying process is smooth and, most importantly, that trial teams actually get better outcomes once they're up and running. I'm joined today by Andrea Burton, our Chief Customer Officer. Andrea leads customer success, oversees education and training, and manages enterprise onboarding. She also works closely with our product team to ensure LitSuite reflects how litigation really works out there in the real world. And Tara Cheever, she may or may not be on this call. She's having some internet issues today, but she's our co-founder and the visionary behind the Lit Suite, and she's our fearless leader here. She will be monitoring the chat and taking any questions as they come in. So please feel free to send them our way. And we'll also send a recording of today's session to everyone tomorrow morning. So today's conversation isn't about trial presentation. It's about how litigators think, how they organize facts, test theories, pressure test arguments, and spot weaknesses before they are visible to a judge, mediator, or jury. And our guest today has spent more than 4 decades doing exactly that. Our guest today is Marcus Castillo. He's a trial lawyer, litigation consultant, wears many hats. He's also the co-founder of Trial Focus in Florida. He's practiced across injury, commercial litigation, eminent domain, and employment law. And today he helps lawyers understand their cases earlier and more clearly through focus groups and mock judging. And he uses LitSuite all the time. And that's especially relevant if not a little unconventional. So he never waits for a trial to start thinking like it's trial. As in Game of Thrones, winter is always coming, and in litigation, trial is always coming. He uses LitSuite early, often, and in places most lawyers don't associate with litigation tools at all, like focus groups, depositions, mediation, mock hearings, and even initial case evaluation. Marcus, our audience is very excited to hear your story. Let's set the stage. So dial it back 20 years ago. What did trial prep look like for most lawyers back then, and how have things changed or not?
Well, trial prep has gone through a real evolution over the years. If we go back 20 years, I think we're at a point in time where the primary tool for trial prep and trial presentation at that point in time was the case map product. And back then, I myself was using case map in my own litigation practice. And I'll have to say, in all fairness to CaseMap, that at one point in time I viewed it as an entrepreneurial company that knew the mindset of trial lawyers and had somewhat of a suite of products themselves, including I think it was CaseMap. Right, sure. So that's a great point, and I think we could talk about studies that talk about multitasking being not, it's a theoretical concept, but I don't think it's practically, doable. I think that there's a real cost, human cost, mentally and emotionally, if you're constantly switching back and forth and living in disarray. So I think that the Lit Suite set of products, if you take them sequentially, I think there's a sequence to how one uses it, as a litigator. And if you really make a commitment to doing that, it really can ultimately lead to, I think, a less stressful and I'd say a more enjoyable, even exciting and fun practice. And I'll talk if you want about the litigation workflow. Um,
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
I'm not sure it was a whole lot of fun, but early in your career, you were thrown into a massive federal litigation long
right.
before these tools existed. And you've joked about being on a 2-year deposition roadshow. What did managing that volume of documents, maybe some video and some testimony without smart technology teach you?
Right. So back in that day, we're talking back in the 1989, 1991 area. And just to kind of give some context to this, I was involved at that point in time in a federal construction product liability case involving fire retardant treated plywood that was installed in roofs in thousands of condos and townhomes. So it involved a 2-year road trip, taking depots left and right, but there were literally, in this case, millions of documents. So what the firm I did, what it did at that point in time, and think again back to, technology 30 plus years ago now. So what that firm did is they hired a bunch of folks to enter these documents into whatever database product at the time, and I want to say it was the Paradox. Okay, I think that was the program at the time, but the man hours that were spent on that were staggering, and I mean the cost was in easily six figure for putting that together. Now, you know 30 years later, we now have OCR, right? We have, an entirely new set of tools that allow the input to take place much, much more efficiently, much cheaper, and much quicker, such that we can now manage document sets and dive into them in a fraction of the time. And, the Doc Review Pad product as an example, is a perfect tool at the beginning of the litigation process to start getting a handle on documents. And that's what I do when I'm on the litigation side of things, when I'm handling my own cases. And it's just like I say, and I can take you through my version if you want of, you know, what I do in the litigation process handling cases. But for me, it begins with DocReviewPad, and it's such a, given the product, the passage of time, but I think it's the best product in the market to manage stuff, documents and stuff.
That's great. Well, let's talk a little bit about focus groups,
Sure.
mock judging, and seeing the case really early. And one of the most unconventional and powerful things you do is run focus groups and mock hearings before dispositive motions or mediation. You're not walking into those sessions with loose notes, right? You're using timelines, documents, and testimony pulled directly from Lit Suite. How do the apps help you test themes?
Sure. So let me, if I can, I'll unpack a little bit about what these sessions look like because there's the deployments of the Lit Suite products can depend a little bit about how formal or not formal the session is. So one iteration of what we do is a less formal, focus group, and in that setting, TrialPad is the star, right? And what we try to do, it's essentially a slideshow, although with uh, the Lit Suite products, you're not bounded by the same sort of restrictions as you are with PowerPoint, where it's sort of linear. You're not as linear, right, with TrialPad. You can go back and forth. You can annotate on the fly, all those sorts of things. But in the kind of setting I'm describing, what I have done is take a group of people through what amounts to a slideshow to unpack a case. I mean, I'm thinking as an example, a medical malpractice case where we literally took them using TrialPad through, sort of building blocks to better understand the case. Using TrialPad, we'd put up first like a medicine 101 piece where we'd get the jury at least familiar to the extent they needed to be, like in a stroke case with brain, anatomy and physiology. And then from there, we could put up bullets or what have you to start unpacking the case. And in that setting, which is again a little less formal, we'd do debriefings as we went along and would ultimately get to a point where we would have a verdict and debrief that. In a more formal situation, which we, loosely call mock trials, we would again, we would use, and we do use, this is present tense as well, TrialPad, using its full extent of tools like, all the annotation tools that it has, like call outs, highlighting, underline, all of that. But we use it in conjunction with some other things. For instance, like with TranscriptPad, linked to videos. As you of course know, we now have the ability to create little, impeachment chunks or trying to think of the right word, snippets, a better word,
Yep.
we can put up, as well. Now, another thing I had not done as much in the past in that setting, but I'm absolutely committed to doing now, is TimelinePad. So the TimelinePad product is a wonderful product in that, and I think it's kind of, if you will, almost a wonderful integration between, a timeline product and the other parts of the suite, because in the timeline, and we don't have something to show on the screen, but if you go to the Lit Suites site, you'll see this. But you have timelines with flags, but the things that's really cool is those flags can be linked to testimony chunks or to documents. So you have, if you will, sort of a dynamic timeline that you can click on, and up comes the proof that is the basis for that data point on the timeline. So, I mean, that's a wonderful uh, tool in the suite that I'm increasingly wanting to use and will use in these mock trial experiences. But yeah, I've mentioned focus group, I've mentioned mock trials. One of the other parts of that is that we do video playbacks of testimony. We'll do, dep video deposition playbacks if we have the testimony. Sometimes we'll do mock testimony as well, we'll do that. But there's all kinds of ways to deploy Lit Suite. One of the things I was thinking about as I was getting ready for this is there's this sort of school of thought in the trial bar that depositions now amount to trial. So if depositions have kind of risen to that level, why not treat depositions at trial from a graphic standpoint? So I think you're going to increasingly see the use of Lit Suite in depositions because you can, especially with Zoom depositions, you can link any of the suite products to a Zoom feed, and you can have quite impressive graphics as you're going through testimony. So I probably answered your question and more, but those are my thoughts here at the moment on that.
Yeah, I mean it's so much more powerful. You're so used to seeing these timelines on a static board, maybe, like a PowerPoint presentation, but talk to me about how you start the timeline, like not the buttons you push, but how do you work in TimelinePad?
Well, and I'm still learning the product. It's a newer product. Initially I was just, was making the entries manually with the program, but one of the things that I soon discovered is that, you can enter the data points to an Excel spreadsheet. There's a template for that. So, I mean, I think that gives you a little bit of an easier way to do that. But, I think it's a product first of, diving in with DocReviewPad, starting to get a sense of things. There's some danger of maybe going a little too early, and then you have to redo the work. So I do, at least my workflow is I will go in first with DocReviewPad and try to get a sense of things, try to at least do an annotation run through with that. But then with that, once I have, a better sense, and hey, one of the things you can do as you're doing that with, if you're thinking that, hey, I'm going to create a timeline, is just create tags. Hey,
Mhm.
have some date tags that you're going to put in your document review so that when you come back, hey, I get 15 tags here, and makes the timeline creation process a lot easier. So,
Have you ever asked a judge in one of these mock trials or a juror what their impression or perception of this type of technology is, whether
sure.
it makes you look like you have deep pockets, or just give me an idea of what we're looking at?
I think that's a valid question, and being totally honest, I think that there is at some point a danger at looking a little too sophisticated. And I think we'd really have to just spend a lot of time unpacking that. But I mean, for the most part, the feedback I've had has been very positive. Jurors, hey, they don't want to be there, right? So you really got to take the approach of cutting to the chase, of simplifying it. And if we've all heard this before, you have to make it almost like a TV show. Folks watch these legal shows and they somehow get the impression that a case from intake all the way to a verdict is all going to take place in under an hour if you include commercials, right? So that's what the culture believes. So while that's not itself possible, something that tries to move in that direction, I think is where trial lawyers have to go. So
Oh, yeah. Many of the associate attorneys that I talk to say they grew up with an iPad. So that's where we are. We're in 2026, and the
exactly.
iPad's been around since 2010.
Right.
Um, so let's just move on to um, sorry, that TrialPad is not just a tool, it's a thinking tool. So let's reset a common misconception. You've said many times TrialPad is where the case lives. So walk us through when and how a case actually starts for you inside of the Lit Suite. In DocReviewPad, for example, on day one.
Right. So, I've mentioned the sequence, but not really even talked about that much about what the sequence is. So again, not to belabor it, for me, if I'm taking a case from intake forward, I begin with DocReviewPad. I'm tagging, as we mentioned a moment ago, it may be critical dates, but I'm also trying to get a sense of issues. Hey, you're going to have some idea of the elements of the case from the get-go, right? So you may be thinking about, the elements at that point in time. Hey, another thing, if you want to inject the trial consulting and mock trial piece into it, if you're ultimately thinking not only about the judge to whom you have to prove elements, but also a jury, then you're early on going to be thinking about themes, right? You're going to be thinking about the whole gamut of, what the trial bar, thinks about themes, storytelling, all of that. So you may well have in mind some tags that you are going to want to, put on a document or on testimony as well. But anyway, I begin with DocReviewPad. As the case evolves, and I may now want to use TimelinePad pretty early on, but sooner or later we're going to be in deposition. So then we use, the set of tools, like I said a moment ago, TrialPad, for instance, in deposition to make the deposition more compelling. But on the back end, using TranscriptPad, you now have this ability to, like you did with DocReviewPad, to go back and annotate the transcript, to issue code it, to tag it for themes, etc. And in the final analysis to again create these impeachment snippets or whatever you want to call them, be it impeachment or substantive snippets that are linked to video testimony. So, that then takes us downstream to mediation, where TrialPad again is a wonderful tool, to persuade, right? Downstream from that, and it may sometimes this will actually occur before mediation, but summary judgment motions. Hey, the reporting capabilities of these products is wonderful, right? You may be able to have a MSJ re report that does most of the work you need to defeat or to argue a motion for summary judgment. But by this point in time, now we're starting to think seriously about TrialPad, and we're bringing it all together, and all of these products, if you will, flow into TrialPad, and that's my flow more or less.
A little bit off topic, but you walk into one of these mediation hearings or deposition.
Yeah.
What technology, what accessories, what type of iPad do you bring with you?
Well, I have used that. That's funny you mentioned that because I have an iPad. I'm about to buy a new one. Mine's getting a little bit aged, and of late I've been using my Mac for that. But it's funny. I will see sometimes folks using Sanction. Okay. And again, going back to the case map, I mean, Sanction at one point, I think, became part of the team and is still part of the team. The thing about Sanction, be it whether it's being used at trial or I've seen it used, like I say, in mediation and otherwise,
Mhm.
you need an operator. You can't really, as an attorney, both advocate and manipulate screens with the kind of complexity that a program like Sanction has. But you can do that with the TrialPad or the LitSuite products. So I mean, it goes back to some of the original motivation to why to try the products out in the first place. You have the portability, right? The tool is so portable that it's just makes for, in the end, an air of competence, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about case map, text map, sanction.
Right.
And I'm aging myself, but I've heard of all of them. They are definitely siloed, outdated, and relatively much more expensive than let's
Right. No question.
um and and just something important to note, sanction was developed for an IT role, someone who is very adept in manipulating technology and can run the system for the attorney. And LitSuite was built for the attorney. So it's a very user-friendly platform. Do you agree with that?
There's no question about that. Just again, we've all seen or have heard the war stories of, in court, someone having the attorney having to yell to the operator, "Hey, move to page 7," or whatever the back and forth that goes on there, and it can be off-putting, and it certainly, reflects, I think, less than an air of control that one has to have in the courtroom.
Well, you've said a lot. You've brought a lot to the table today. How has the Lit Suite evolved with iOS, and where do you think things are headed now with AI? Do you think something interesting is coming in 2026, 2027? How would you like to see it evolve?
Well, yeah, I think AI, of course, has been the conversation topic du jour and beyond du jour. I think it's here to stay. And AI is a complicated topic for lawyers because I think for a lot of lawyers right now, they hear AI, and the first thing they think about is case hallucination over on the research side. So there may be some folks who, were curious and feel like, I'm seeing some of my colleagues get stung, and maybe I'll back up a step. And there's going to be that contingent of people. But I think for those lawyers who have a longer view of the profession and have some, are curious enough to look into it, I think it's going to be absolutely revolutionary. I mean, you're seeing AI incorporated in all kinds of suites. For instance, like Clio. I'm a Clio user, and Clio has just adopted an AI product or an AI component to their product that I think has the capability when it, gets better developed or whatever to really revolutionize that product in terms of intake and, summarization of the components of that product. But yeah, I think AI is going to absolutely be here to stay in terms of how it might interface with the Lit Suite product. I'm almost kind of curious to hear what you guys have to say, if you guys have any, plans for that. But yeah, I certainly think that AI is going to increasingly be part of what we work with day to day.
There have obviously been rumblings here in our development team, so more to come there.
Yeah.
We're really excited about it. Before we end, Andrea, do you have any questions coming in through the chat or any questions of your own that we need to ask?
We do not have any questions in the chat, but I really liked, Marcus, how you brought up that depositions are kind of mini trial. People are using TrialPad in depositions just as much as they might be, because a lot of times it doesn't go to trial. So is there, what, do you have anything else to add about how TrialPad might be used in a deposition?
Well, I'm just trying to think, and I don't want to just, I think that certainly, highlight the call outs, the full set of annotation tools are just perfect for bringing attention. Like, I know in my career, all the fumbling that's taken place where you try to get a witness on page 4, paragraph 3, etc., and just all of that, but now with the ability to call out and just to put it on a screen, in the middle of the deposition. Of course, a lawyer has to make the commitment to that kind of organization, but keeping in mind that, hey, it can pay off enormously for you. But I think that, those are the kinds of things one can do to be just much more persuasive.
And then I also wanted to follow up on your technology that you bring. Do you bring anything else with you to be prepared in any courtrooms besides the iPad? And you said you also use your Mac. Is there anything else that you're bringing with you to be prepared?
Well, it kind of depends on the courtroom, but in the past I've used an Apple TV as a mode of connection, right? You can have that but most courtrooms are getting more sophisticated, though. I've used that in the past, but I bring my Mac and my iPad. I mean, we got some peripherals here that attach to that. I just recently got a ScanSnap scanner, IX 2500. It's a wonderful tool that I may start bringing around because things do happen on the fly and it has the ability to OCR. And of course, y'all's products, uh, you know,
Yeah,
interact extremely well with OCR. So I think bringing a scanner is going to be part of what I do. It's so compact that I can put it in a little carrying case. So.
that's awesome. Thank you for that extra information. And Hillary, back to you to finish up.
Yeah, we're going to go ahead and close this out if there aren't any questions coming in from the chat. But we'll wrap this up with Marcus. Thank you so much for joining us. For any junior lawyers, any associates who have watched this and thought, yeah, I really don't try very many cases. Maybe I've never been in a trial yet. I don't need Lit Suite. What would you say to those people?
I think that if you want to obtain the best settlement possible, if that's the objective, you've got to organize cases as if they're going to trial. Even if you don't go to trial, you'll get your best settlements if you prepare a case as if it's going. Defense. I'm speaking as if I'm talking to plaintiff's lawyer, but hopefully you've got to have a trial mindset. That's what will give you leverage in negotiations and your dealings with other lawyers and defense lawyers in particular.
And one question from me myself, 90% of our customers, Lit Suite users work in Microsoft environments during the day at their law firms. Have you always been a Mac guy, or do you
Oh,
typically
that's a good
also
question.
use PCs at your law firm and in your trial consulting practice?
Right.
And how
So
easy is the transition for someone who maybe isn't so familiar with Mac?
sure. So I have operated within a Mac environment for some time now, but I didn't start that way. I started on a PC. And the thing about the Mac environment, the iOS environment is, it's built towards simplicity. So, I would encourage lawyers that otherwise live in a PC environment, get a get an iPad. They're not expensive at all. They're under $1,000 or a couple $100. They're not expensive. So experiment. Hey, this is your career. This is, should be a place of inspiration and just give it a try. The learning curve is not, it's nothing. I find PCs, frankly, to be a lot harder to work with when I occasionally use them now. So no, I just would encourage folks, give it a try. You'll be surprised how easy it is.
Thanks so much, Marcus. Thanks
Thank
everyone
you.
for joining us today. I will make sure that everyone has a recording of this session tomorrow morning in your inbox, as well as some helpful links. Reach out to me about the enterprise program if you have a trial team or a law firm interested in collaboration in our apps, and join us next week when we have Tom Vidal from Pryor Cashman joining us. Talk soon. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.